I do not believe it is an exaggeration to say I understand Tomodachi life. I played the 3DS game on launch, but primarily for the last half a decade, I have played the original DS game, which I like to think has given me a unique perspective on them. They are dioramas of your friends, a friend collection, if you will. Haha. A diorama where you watch stand-ins of your friends go about their shockingly mundane lives. Drinking coffee, sitting at the fountain, and grilling with the dudes. So when I saw that Living the Dream was introducing island building and item customization, I was concerned. These games have not and have never been about that kind of player expression outside of the designs for your Miis. Focusing on those types of features would only distract from the series' main focus, your Tomodachi's lives. Needless to say, this game may as well be the worst case scenario. Miis are merely tools and props for your own creative expression. Creative expression that is clearly this game's priority above all else, including the Miis themselves. They hardly have any actual conversations, and almost never fight with each other. In this sequel, they don't do anything without you forcing them to, without your explicit permission to speak, dress, and live how you want them to. The look-alike, the bridge meant to ground you in the world and create a sense of relatability and sincerity, is replaced with nothing. Because make no mistake, this game is not a diorama like the previous games. It is a power fantasy. And the island building isn't even good to compensate. I will start by saying it is not impossible to have fun in this game. It is not impossible to have fun saying my favorite bath time companion is a toaster. But the issue is that it's purely shock value with no longevity tied directly to your creativity and how much effort you're willing to put into the game. And how much effort does this game deserve when it isn't willing to put in any itself? Also, that toaster line was used the same way every other line I wrote was. Still, there are a couple things I really like in this game that are hard to go back from. The addition of quirks as a level up bonus for your Miis is an unequivocal good. Some even impact the way your Miis speak to one another to be more fitting of their demeanor, which is pretty cool. However, the amount of them is sorely lacking, and a lot of the options are quite frankly terrible. Some also overlap far too much, such as all of the confident greetings and sleep-related quirks. This is how many quirks there are, not how many you'll start with, how many you'll ever have. Some categories get it even worse, with merely 4, 3, or even 2 options. I thought they would have ported the class-based walking animations from Miitopia into the game, but they did not, turning a tool meant to make your Miis stand out rather dull. Because if everyone is quirky, no one is. Quirky in the same way, that is. So this great feature is handicapped by this game's lack of content. Making Miis changing their outfits into an optional quirk is a great change though. It keeps the option for Miis to have their own autonomy and ruin their look, only if you want them to. Lingo is a great concept that could have kept the game infinitely fresh with topics for discussion, even if the ramifications of it permeate throughout the entire game. The new bowling minigame as well as the head clearing minigame are pretty fun. Catchphrases are expanded on and improved. My Mii ending every sentence with "I guess" was pretty funny, I guess. But they removed all of the unique animations you could give them in the previous game. It was part of what made them funny to begin with. Mii interactions were the core of this entire series. Why have multiple Miis together on an island if they didn't have fun or interesting interactions with one another? People revel in how strange the games can be when you fill your island with a bunch of malformed freaks, and it is undoubtedly entertaining. But the series is also strangely quiet, melancholic, and reminiscent, treating the stand-ins of your friends with due respect. These games are not the product of a team of overworked Japanese men on drugs. They are relatively tame in their presentation, as exemplified through its calm but strange music score. Living the Dream's music does its best to sound strange and detached in an attempt to prevent you from being genuinely invested in your Miis. As a kid, I would watch Miis gossip in the cafe or silently sip coffee together, taking in the atmosphere. I would watch them speak over the grill and food, blowing away the smoke, or watching them become black with soot. And my absolute favorite, I would watch the Miis constantly stop the car in a dark foresty path in the dead of night. It was incredible. That was my favorite scene, but unmistakably, the biggest example of this game's sincerity is when a Mii wants to propose to their love interest.
I want to propose to Lamptops.
Yes, you should. Yes, you should.
This is played completely straight. There are no visual gags, no unusual gimmicks, or even music. Just the sounds of fireworks going off on the horizon, trains running in the distance, and wine glasses clanking, all while tension rises, as you play a game with shockingly strict timing, a game where you merely have to tap their thought bubble when they're thinking about your me.
My darling, will you marry me?
Yes. Yes. 1,000 times yes.
This game was not afraid of trying to be something. Now how was this done in Living the Dream?
So,
This is so easy, I don't know if you can even fail it. The cafe is also ruined, with a high chance of replacing the Mii's casual gossip with superfans gushing over insert lingo here, or robots that only go bleep bloop, interspersed with even more lingo you've written. Living the Dream lacks any and all elements of sincerity the original two games had, reveling in just how wacky and strange the series can be. The one strong exception would have been the newborn baby cutscene with its shockingly great cinematography, but it was held back by its primary focus not being the actual child, but the user-generated content it plays with. It is not inherently a problem that the game is weird, but the gutting of the more grounded side creates a strong barrier of disconnect and detachment that the previous games never suffered from.
Kind of feel bad for Walrus now.
This would not be that big of an issue if it were made up for with a substantial amount of hilarious and strange content for your Miis to engage in, but unfortunately, that is just not the case. Mii interactions in this game have been gutted. In what I can only call the most retarded decision of the decade, Miis don't actually speak to each other in this game. Outside of rare, special events, they only ever speak incomprehensible gibberish.
But then again, enjoy Toblunga.
The amount of times I've heard yabba dabba flabba is enough to make any man lose his fucking mind and postpone his Undertale Yellow video. I cannot think of a more clear case of a development team completely misunderstanding or disregarding the appeal of a series, or just being appallingly lazy. The game on the loading screen, which this game has a lot of, recommends that you sit back, grab some popcorn, and watch your Miis live out their lives on the island. But they don't fucking do anything. I spent around an hour watching my Miis go about their lives on my island, even letting it play in the background next to me while writing this video. They run around in circles, get stuck on objects they could easily walk around, and occasionally meet up with other Miis to speak incomprehensible gibberish, to then run around in circles some more. Nothing substantial or interesting progresses or occurs without your input. Instead, you are required to manually force interactions and relationships with your Miis, unlike the previous games. You can do it endlessly. They never grow tired or annoyed by you forcing them together repeatedly for hours. So Miis don't do anything on their own, removing any and all autonomy they used to have and making interactions the player's responsibility to create themselves. I appreciate they actually speak to each other when becoming friends compared to the original game, but ironically it starts working to the game's own detriment as it quickly becomes repetitive and annoying. Hearing my two friends agree that a big girlfriend is better than a small girlfriend was funny the first time. Then it was a big toaster. Then it was a big archive. Then it was a big ocean, and it just kept going. All terms I spent over a minute thinking of, funny in their original contexts, all used the exact same exhausting way, because the developers couldn't be bothered to come up with any more dialogue. This game almost entirely refuses to center its conversations around anything but the lingo and objects you make. And that's an issue when there isn't very much of it. Even if you fully dedicated yourself to creating hundreds of unique terms and items, it still wouldn't be very entertaining due to the same 3 templates for dialogue being used over and over. Sometimes modern terms like vibes, memes, and influencer are also thrown around and completely take me out of the experience. Miis always become friends in the exact same way, standing in front of their house and agreeing that insert lingo here is the way to go. Miis tripping or becoming paralyzed while entertaining the first time quickly becomes repetitive because there are only 3 of them. The game fades to black during these scenes, which, while lazy, could have been a very smart decision as it allows your sick and twisted mind to imagine anything you want happening. Except that can't actually end up happening, because Miis only have 2 or 3 incredibly specific things to say during these scenes. It ends up being a method of easily improving your Mii's relationship with another Mii with absolutely no downside. Mii interactions, the core of this series, was made into an obstacle that I continuously wanted to get over with as fast as possible, skipping any and all cutscenes as soon as I had known I had heard the dialogue before. When Miis do end up saying or doing something I haven't seen yet, it's hard to tell if the writing is substantially better or worse than the previous game. Dialogue that may have otherwise been funny is ruined by the predictable subject matter, only ever using user-generated content over the game's own. Though a feeling in my gut tells me the writing is just worse and wouldn't have been funny either way. Unlike the original, a lot of the time the writers feel the need to spell out the joke, pointing out that yes, what someone just said was crazy. Such as your Mii pointing out that he's the only islander when he interviews himself at the start of the game. Or the Mii pointing out that the Mii going "Mwahaha, no one can stop us" as the island reaches its maximum size may or may not be a supervillain. Lines of dialogue that would otherwise probably be funny, ruined by the need to explain the joke. The only cutscene I remember fondly in this game is the household conversation one. It's actually pretty funny, and ironically it uses your lingo the least. One of the primary interactions in the game that I absolutely detest is when you force a Mii to try and make another feel better when they're feeling down. There's no dialogue from the Miis themselves, just canned animations and a text blurb stating what they're talking about, because the developers couldn't be bothered to write any actual dialogue. And most insultingly, there are these completely fake gauges displaying their progress. These gauges mean absolutely nothing. They are not tied to the Mii's actual progress or chance of success. They're merely cosmetic and can be completely undone at any time. It mocks the gameplay this series used to have. It's insulting and a waste of time. I skip these every single time they happen and never miss out on anything. Normal Mii problems, you know, the thing you spent your time doing in the previous games to help your Miis and get rewards and make them happy. They're entirely cosmetic now. They could be completely removed as a mechanic in this game and nothing would change. Due to the complete removal of items, there is no longer any differentiation from handing a Mii an outfit they were begging for and love, or handing a Mii an outfit when they were totally content. Miis do not become happier than they otherwise would have, nor do they gain any more EXP. They react the same way they would if their thought bubble wasn't even there to begin with. It's fucking baffling. It only exists to give the illusion of this game being in line with the previous ones, because otherwise its completely different design and intent would be obvious. Miis hardly, if not ever, fight with each other in this game. Every time I would boot up the DS or 3DS game, something would have happened to make 2 Miis really pissed. They were brutal to each other at times. It always kept you on the edge of your seat.
I may have sabotaged this.
She didn't even show up.
Like the previous game, there is a chance for their apology to fail and ruin their friendship, except it doesn't actually ruin their friendship with the other Mii. It merely remains stagnant for a short amount of time until it can be repaired by the Mii or a third party, making the entire system almost entirely inconsequential. This game desperately needed to expand Mii relationships to have more variety, especially with how they now visibly wander around the island, losing the abstraction of the previous games. I wanted Miis that detested each other and always argued whenever they encountered one another. I wanted rival Miis that would always get into fights and make other Miis around them pick a side. I wanted Miis that were playboys and would get all of the women Miis on the island to fall in love with them. That would be what I'd consider a natural evolution of the Tomodachi life formula, taking advantage of the Switch's more powerful hardware and 11 fucking years of development. Instead, this game does nothing to evolve Mii relationships. If anything, it has regressed because fights are so incredibly uncommon. This game habituates a main gameplay loop where you're constantly maintaining and improving all of your Mii relationships by slamming them into one another repeatedly, forming an island where nothing erratic ever happens, games, where every Mii is sickly sweet to one another, their feelings on another Mii never able to devolve past the point of pure elation. At the very worst, their relationship will remain unchanged. This is unlike the previous games, where it was entirely up to the Miis themselves how their relationships, be it love or friendship, would turn out, giving an illusion of personality and depth to each Mii that this game lacks. This could have been counteracted with a chance for these conversations to go terribly awry, and harm their relationships with one another. But it can never end that way, as that would get in the way of you cultivating your own little perfect island. Because of this, I was able to make everyone I wanted to perfect friends, have them all move in together, and love exactly who I wanted them to. Mii's getting sad or mad in the previous games served as a real obstacle and punishment you either had to fix or mitigate. Being sad or mad meant they wouldn't make friends, ask for help, or gain EXP. In Living the Dream, the system is made far more confusing through what I can only describe as multiple layers of sadness and anger. Mii's can feel down or agitated, but it doesn't actually alter how they speak to each other. Instead, and very ironically, it lets you improve their relationships with other Miis by getting other Miis to improve their mood. It can also be easily solved by food they even only slightly like. Rarely and confusingly, they can still suddenly become depressed like in the original games, requiring you to deplete their sadness meter through the same older methods. Except not really, because you can once again plop another Mii in front of them and there's a 50-50 chance they'll just fix them. Not that it would even be much of a challenge without that feature, as items are unlimited now. I was actively deterred from making objects for a long time because they kept replacing everything. I made the food cakey and thought it was sort of funny, but I ended up having to delete it because it kept replacing all of the items in my Mii's dreams, dialogue, and cutscenes to the point it became annoying, not surprising. Just like New Horizons, making items actively makes your experience worse because they're given such a high priority that it replaces 90% of the interactions your Mii's have with stuff related to your objects. The settings and circumstances of dreams, instead of being unique and moody, use set pieces from the island, empty houses, as well as pre-built areas using objects from the island editor. It looks absolutely terrible in comparison because they were too lazy to actually model any unique areas like in the 3DS game. This is carried over to the all-time favorite food animation as well, as it now takes place on a tiny island constructed from the game's editor. It's so distractingly bad that I couldn't even enjoy what was actually a pretty funny cutscene. The gameplay variety of the dreams is also thoroughly lacking in comparison. The only dream I actually remember having a unique gimmick was the top dream, which really only boiled down to you mashing the L and R triggers. Miis will almost always fall in love with the exact same cutscene, with the exact same camera angle, and the exact same effects. It turned what used to be sudden and surprising into something slow and predictable. Denying a Mii their feelings for another Mii doesn't make them depressed anymore either, because once again, that would get in the way of you curating your perfect little island, which is clearly what this game wants to let you do, unlike the previous games. They shrug it off like it was all in their head. All of this is what completely and unmistakably ruins every single facet of this game. There are other blatant issues as well, but the degradation and repetitiveness of Mii interactions is just so abhorrently bad, removing the single most important element of the series that made them entertaining. What's the point of spending so much longer making Miis with the new face paint system when they hardly interact with each other or the world around them? What's the point of manually forcing Miis to befriend and interact with one another when their interactions are the same copy and pasted dialogue over and over? What's the point of solving the problems of Miis on the island when it doesn't positively affect them or give you anything in return? There is none. The gameplay loop of Tomodachi life does not exist in Living the Dream. Some people may argue that the 3DS game had a lot of repeated scenes and dialogue, and that is true. But it wrote around that limitation far better, focusing on more mundane and believable Mii behavior, and its wider array of subject matter not limited to terms you've inputted. Also, it was only $20 to $40, and didn't have this game's 11 years of development time on an over 20 times more powerful console. I have great news for the people who hated makeup for good reasons. It's gotten even worse. Now you can completely paint over a Mii's face and remove their eyes, face, and mouth completely. For the artists out there, I also have great news, as it's also a complete and total downgrade from makeup functionally. It's far harder to use the Switch's 6-inch touchscreen without a built-in stylus to precisely design a face than it was to place some shockingly convenient objects. It doesn't have any of the more in-depth functionality either, such as objects linked to specific parts of the face. Face paint is also confined to a minuscule 256 by 256 resolution, a far lower resolution than makeup, which looks far, far cleaner in comparison. Able to take advantage of real transparency and anti-aliasing living the dream does not support. But luckily, what you draw with face paint gets smoothed and upscaled using an algorithm that results in strange artifacting. Thanks, Nintendo, what an upgrade! I laugh out loud every single time I see this sad, miserable little man though, which is what they traded in all of the previous game's content for. I do not hate makeup, and I do not hate face paint. I actually find it quite enjoyable to make Miis that accurately resemble their inspirations for once, even if it comes at the cost of the game's art style. In a perfect world, Nintendo would put in actual effort to create assets for every niche scenario that would also fit nicely within the game's art style, but that would be difficult to implement and harm the oh-so-coveted accessibility and approachability of the Mii Maker. All of the new features they did bother adding are nice, and I do find myself using them quite a bit. New mouths, eyes, ears, all with extra options that fit within the art style of the Miis while being very lenient with their limits. The new noses are especially welcome, matching the more appealing, simplistic, one-sided look of the first nose very well, and becoming everyone I know's go-to nose. The only exception is strangely hairstyles. I struggle to find anything even remotely tolerable looking for all of my Miis, with some sets being restricted from being separate bangs or backs for what can feel like no reason. It's incredibly lacking compared to Miitopia's wig system, which, despite its clashing art style, I never struggled to find fitting hair with. The cowlick being a greatly missed addition. Here are 20 new types of dreads for your Mii though. This game also swapped the placement of the up and down buttons in the Mii editor. Why the fuck would you do that? Genuinely, what retarded fucking new hire made that decision? Execute him live on air. It's like being stuck with inverted camera controls, except worse, because I actually like inverted camera controls. When choosing a Mii's height and width, you're given other Miis as a reference, which is a very nice addition. But these Miis constantly shift around and continue to wear hats you've given them, which is such a baffling thing to overlook and makes the entire system useless. When designing a Mii's voice, you actually have one less option now. They removed the accent slider from the previous game. It would give the Mii's voice a wobbling pitch. It wasn't all that useful, but it's good to know we're removing customization features in this customization-focused sequel. Features such as first and last names, as well as a Mii's favorite color, were removed, which once again signals this game's shift in direction from a friend collection to a sandbox. The default clothing given to Miis, based on their personality, do look nice within the game's art style though, and I found myself using them a lot over the actual clothing I bought. The subtitles, when selecting specific squares of a Mii's personality, are also now gone, because I guess it was too charming. But the best part of all of this Mii creation stuff is that you don't have to do any of it. What the hell? You're given the option between getting help and designing a Mii from scratch. In other words, you are given the option to have the game make a Mii for you based on your blind inputs. While what I say may appear to be hyperbolic, I truly believe it. This is a disgusting addition that should not exist for anyone. It appeals to people that should not and will not buy and play this game. A Mii is meant to be a representation of your vision, just like any form of art, and this option completely removes that element. If you are not willing to manually design your own Miis, then you shouldn't play a Mii-centered game. That's the equivalent of Minecraft introducing pre-made houses for you to inhabit. But Nintendo has been consistently and firmly trying to appeal to the absolute lowest common denominator, so here we are, the Get Help button. I do not care how little and insignificant this appears, it is a flagrant showcase of Nintendo's shift in direction. This isn't like making a Mii based off of a photo on the 3DS. That was a fun use of the console's technology. This is just for lazy people. This is unlike choosing a lookalike either, as that merely gave you a base to start from in the Mii creator. Getting to see your Miis actually move around and interact on the entire island in real time is a perfect idea. In the 3DS game, they would leave their apartments and interact with one another and hang out at different places, but it was limited in how it was presented. Actually seeing them on the island as a physical place and not just an abstracted hub is genius. It just sucks that it all looks like complete shit. This game is an artistic black hole. Textures are flat, muddy, and blurry. The water looks like the water from Legends Arceus at most angles, except actually it may look worse. I can only assume this was done to make the player-drawn textures feel like less of a downgrade, because house interiors still look pretty good. This game makes the few fully modeled scenes in the 3DS game look next-gen in comparison, with its far more defined textures, lighting, and object detail, as well as everything not being stuck to a blocky grid. Every single object, be it a house, store, foliage, or terrain, all have to be confined to a small square to work within the limitations of this game's island builder. This results in everything looking unnaturally condensed and repetitive, the same asset copy and pasted everywhere in a square pattern. It looks so unfathomably ugly and unnatural compared to the previous games. I thought the island customization in New Horizons looked bad, but at least that game had multiple island layers for depth, arched bridges, and diagonal walls, something this game completely lacks. They don't have to confine island sculpting and building placement to a grid, but I guess the technology of Doshin the Giant from 1999 for the Nintendo 64 is too far ahead of us. In a pitiful attempt of what I can only assume is trying to make buildings look less out of place on the island's square terrain, all structures and houses are square as hell. That's a square. That's a square. That's a square. It looks absolutely dreadful compared to the designs made over a decade ago, like cheap kids' meal toys, exemplified by the shiny and bland lighting. If the toon lighting was meant to help face paint blend more into the Mii models, then it didn't work. Whereas Wind Waker's art style was meticulously crafted down to the color palette of a lightning flash being manually chosen, here it is clearly done out of a lack of effort. Miitopia, a port of a 3DS game also centered around Miis with customizable faces, looks so fucking beautiful in comparison. Defined textures, colorful lighting that reflects off of surfaces, and terrain that's not confined to a square grid. That is the power of baked lighting, I guess. Baked lighting that Living the Dream can't take advantage of due to the customizable island. The customizable island that will always look worse than both of the previous games' islands no matter how much time you pour into it. Clothing in this game is a massive visual downgrade from the 3DS game, which had far more model variety and modeled parts. All of the normal clothing in Living the Dream was clearly designed with some form of texture editor similar to the palette shop accessible in-game. The only difference being transparency, and a bit more model variety. Clothes only being a texture results in them looking incredibly repetitive looking and unnaturally flat when they really shouldn't be. It makes it hard to care about shoes and pants being separate now. Once again, Miitopia, a 3DS game, far surpasses this game with its different sparkly and shiny clothing materials, and modeled parts that really pop out. Shop interiors are completely gone now, replaced with a flatly colored background like a modern Pokemon game. The interior of the cafe sadly looks awful now, having lost all of its finer details, probably to confine it to the game's grid-based layout. There's no counter with stools to sit on, no cash register or telephone, no kitchen. How the hell do they even get their food? Originally, Miis could have been seen working behind the counter as a Mii would quietly sip their coffee. But that isn't even possible anymore. At least the concert hall music still plays in the background to remind you of what you have lost. But hey, this game has a wall with capsule machines that can't even be used by Miis. Awesome! The soda machines work though, probably because they already made half the functionality for it with the vending machine objects. This game is a sequel to a 3DS game, meaning it has to cram a user interface designed for 2 screens onto 1 screen. This was actually done well in Miitopia's case, but Living the Dream suffers a lot from this transition. Originally, I felt the DS's 2 screens were merely a clever use of the console's surface area, from the convenient and durable clamshell design, as well as a way to make sure that when you're using the touchscreen, you aren't covering any necessary information. I did not believe the 2-screen format was actually all that intuitive or useful during gameplay. However, this game has made me realize just how conveniently utilized it actually was. Scrolling through a list in Living the Dream is agonizingly slow without a scroll bar, and instead of names, you're shown a list of 6 images. That's one more item than the previous two games, but it's counterbalanced by alternate colors of clothing and interiors being stored as separate items, meaning your actual list will look something like this. This was a problem that did not exist in the 3DS game, where you selected alternate palettes with the R and L triggers. How the hell do you remove a quality of life feature from a decade-old game? You can toggle a full screen menu to show 3 rows on screen instead, but that creates the opposite issue of it becoming indistinct visual noise. Like entering the cereal aisle and spending 20 minutes staring at the rows of colorful boxes until they lose all meaning. What is absolutely a downgrade from the DS and 3DS games, though, is how you select your Miis. The game has gone from displaying tiles of up to 40 Miis at once to 6 or 12 Miis at once. It's a complete pain to navigate, and it's meant to be the convenient option compared to manually dragging a Mii across the island. A Mii's info card is now a third of the size, and stapled to the left of the screen, only showing the player what's contextually important. It's not as convenient as the first two games, but it still could have been entirely functional if handled well. However, its modernized, oversimplified look compromises its readability. The big shiny orange bar of the original two games stood out far better and was easily readable at a glance, as well as actually designed. The bar in the Switch version is minuscule, and the shade of green used blends very poorly while also being offensive to the eyes. A lot of options that were just on screen before are now nested within menus, such as clothing and catchphrases. An inconvenient but necessary change with a lack of consistent touch controls. I believe touchscreens are the fucking antichrist for reasons I've wanted to make a video on for over half a decade now. But the DS and 3DS are the two cases where the technology was actually utilized well. And it's a shame Living the Dream didn't include touchscreen controls outside of the Mii Maker, as it could have made some menu navigation slightly less tedious when in handheld mode. I doubt it would have impacted performance at all, and even if it would have, it's not like the game could run much worse, so I believe it's merely a result of laziness on the developer's part. It is certainly possible to make games on the Switch that both look and run beautifully, such as Splatoon 2 and Mario Odyssey. But typically when a game does look this godforsakenly ugly, it's done for the sake of smooth performance. After all, that's the trade-off we've been taught to expect. Tomodachi Life is not a complicated game. It does not use a complex lighting engine. It does not use any complex physics simulations, and it does not even have you control a player character that can interact with the world in a typical fashion. Pikmin 3, a game centered around 100 individual and controlled creatures on screen at once, managed by 3 captains, runs at a smooth, albeit disappointing 30 FPS, and has far more detailed textures, shading, naturally sculpted terrain, and objects. So there's no reason Living the Dream should run any worse than that. This game runs so fucking bad. I cannot express just how absolutely abysmally this game runs. Every action you take in this game causes it to start having a stroke. This game more frequently chugs than Tears of the Kingdom, an open world game with dozens of physics simulating objects and advanced lighting effects. This is goddamn Tomodachi Life. Tomodachi Life on an island constructed from a simple tile-based system like an old RPG Maker game. The most bewildering example of this game's breathtaking performance are the pop-ups that announce your Mii's relationship changing. What kind of dark magic do you have to use to make moving images and a background lag so much on a console over 20 times more powerful than the 3DS? Twilight Princess didn't suddenly start dipping into the single digits every single time black bars appeared on screen when Z-targeting. The PC port of which looks so fucking pretty and smooth, by the way. This is the future of gaming. The event cutscenes in this game, cutscenes that remove all other Tomodachis from the island, and purely focus on the animated shenanigans of a single couple, also manage to lag somehow. Menus are incredibly choppy and delayed in Living the Dream, making navigating them an agonizing task. Smooth and responsive menu navigation is so important to making a game feel good to play that Final Fantasy VII specifically programmed its menus and only its menus to run at 60 FPS. Even Game Freak programmed the battles in black and white to run at 60 FPS compared to the overworld's 30 because it's just that important. This game does the exact opposite, intentionally capping its frame rate to 20 inside some menus and cutscenes, though personally it looks and feels like even less. There's no way the Wish Fountain menu is so computationally complex to render that it couldn't achieve a smooth 60 FPS. and had to be capped at 20 to prevent the Switch from melting. I don't know if this was an intentional handicap to make the Switch 2 version look superior, but if it was, then it does a bad job, because it's still capped at 30 FPS with occasional frame drops. Truly impeccable how little Nintendo gives a fuck anymore that they view this as acceptable. They've actually managed to make a game that runs worse than Game Freak's current output. The Nintendo seal of quality used to mean something. Load times also suffer, often being over 2 seconds long just to enter an empty house. Though, to be fair, the load times on 3DS weren't much better. Taking into account all of these performance issues, they decided it would be a good idea to introduce 4 time-sensitive minigames into Living the Dream. Red Light Green Light was a fun game in Tomodachi Collection because the game's frame rate made movement snappy and reactable. In Living the Dream, it becomes a boring slog with its almost half a second of input delay. One of the new minigames introduced is probably the most common now, especially since it's the only game I've ever seen groups of Miis ask to play with you. No repeats. Perhaps it's easier in Japanese, I know it's a common game there, but in English a lot of the food names are in other languages, and memorizing over 15 of them and responding in a time-sensitive manner is obnoxious. Not impossible, just tedious, and it made me avoid whenever Miis would ask to play minigames, which I wouldn't have done if it wasn't for the fact they removed all of the good minigames. The item dropping minigame, Match 2 with its alternate versus mode, the Islander quiz, and football don't return as minigames in Living the Dream. Cards doesn't exist anymore either, which I'm sure some people are very pleased by, but I actually liked the minigame for how it would showcase a Mii's different personality. They'd either bluff, look shocked, or completely stone-faced when hovering over their cards. Also, it was replaced with a literal coin flip. Speaking of item dropping, you can't throw a Mii's food on the floor and force them to pick it up anymore. Sigh. Smaller personal minigames such as back scratching, mosquito swatting, and sneezing no longer exist, only being replaced by the head clearing minigame, meaning Living the Dream has less than the original DS games. This game has barely any content. What has become blatantly apparent to me after Living the Dream and New Horizons is that object and island customization is used as a crutch for a lack of actual in-game content. It happened with New Horizons, and now I can definitively say it happened with this series as well. These games are not meant to be inherently fun. They're made to be fun when you draw a picture of Silksong to plaster onto a Nintendo Switch to watch your Mii's gawk at. Or fun when you watch a TikTok short of someone's crazy invention out of context, even though in-game they have no actual purpose or utility. It's why the main people I still see playing these games are what I view as creepily obsessed. I'm going to be incredibly presumptuous here and state that I believe these types of games are made for a subcategory of artists who want to make things they find funny but are too lazy to actually put in the effort to fully create something themselves. Sometimes I can be like that. I used to be into game modding and not game development for a reason. But if I wanted to see my friend using a toaster as a bath time companion, I would open up Clip Studio Paint and start animating it myself. I wouldn't want to watch my Mii's insert the word into a bunch of pre-made templates. If I wanted to see my own characters in 3D, I would go into Blender and start modeling them myself. I wouldn't want to slap a low-resolution texture onto a Mii's face and stare at them while they run around in circles. Basically, why would I ever want to waste my time designing things and living the dream that will always end up being worse than what I could create anywhere else? Why use its ugly, rudimentary toolset when I could open up Blender and get something actually permanently useful out of my time? I would be lying if I said I never found some of this stuff funny. User-generated content in games is never not entertaining when put into literally anything, be it A Hat in Time or Undertale Yellow. But it's far more rare than clips online would make you think. And if you're playing a game purely to create your own content, I have to question why you wouldn't just buy a pack of paper for a 60th of the price. It has a larger surface area than the Switch, and the resolution is breathtaking. While items can look fine, I refuse to believe any of the objects you can create in this game can look anything but ungodly awful. The repetitive, low-poly geometry makes Bubsy 3D look good in comparison, and the complete lack of normal mapping, as well as low-resolution upscaled textures, just look bad. Miitopia didn't suffer from this problem nearly as much for me because its core gameplay was still consistently fun and engaging. A constant roller coaster of ups and downs. It also had a well-written story that played around your creations in a consistently humorous and unique way. Living the Dream does not have Miitopia's pre-made writing, one-time story events, real gameplay, or pleasing visuals. So, when appraising what these games actually have to offer and not what you can make in them, they're incredibly bare bones. In what I can only describe as totally mobile game core, Living the Dream adds a second currency into the mix that's used to unlock items you were previously able to purchase from the start. Thankfully, it's not a paid currency. Nintendo's not that evil yet, and hopefully never will be outside of their mobile division. However, it's still an absurdly stupid feature to have included. You're given a small amount of emotion balls after watching an event, but primarily receive them through the same methods that also give you money. It makes the separation of the two currencies feel pointless as they're both gotten the exact same way. Emotion balls are your main method of unlocking new content in this game. That new content being level up items in rooms that were previously unlocked from the start. Previously, you would be presented with a selection of 3 interiors to buy every day, with a special interior that changed every month. In Living the Dream, that has been limited to 1 new interior a week. Instead, you primarily obtain new interiors using your emotion balls, where you now unlock almost all of them. Interiors in this game have alternate palettes now, which is an incredibly cool addition, but the primary difference between interiors was never their color, it was their furniture and setting. Altering a room's light brown wood to be dark brown wood just isn't all that entertaining, and some interiors completely lack any alternate palettes for no perceivable reason. There are 105 interiors in Living the Dream compared to the 3DS game's 102. Wow, talk about going above and beyond! Except 105 feels like a lie, because compared to the previous games, the interiors reuse a lot of assets. In the previous games, each interior felt so wildly distinct in tone, sound, and architecture. In Living the Dream, they generally have the same boring feel to them. There are definitely still some good ones carried over from the previous games, though. The alternate foyer interiors would be a cool addition if they actually altered the furniture and layout, but sadly they end up being glorified wallpapers. In the 3DS game, you were offered a selection of 28 level-up items to give a Mii some more personality, and a few unique interactions with them. In Living the Dream, that number has been reduced to a mere 16 level-up items, and you now have to manually unlock all of them, one at a time, to be given the privilege of handing them to your Miis. Some popular items removed include the cell phone, rent-a-dog and cat coupons, Wii U, punching bag, and 3DS, because I guess drawing a PNG they stare at is meant to be enough to compensate. The rent-a-dog and cat coupons would give the Miis fully 3D modeled dogs that they would physically interact with alone or as a group, including holding, petting, and playing with them. In Living the Dream, pets are their own separate objects, which you'd think would make them more in-depth, such as maybe having to feed them, pet them, or walk them in a minigame. But in reality, they've been turned into flat images that bounce around your Mii while they use pre-made expressions and generic dialogue. Video games and television are also separate items now, but they are only images plastered onto a Switch or TV that the Miis watch. In both of the previous games, they'd actually be shown physically playing games such as bowling, be it alone or as a group. The last feature from the previous games that now has to be unlocked is the vacation ticket. Originally, vacation tickets were a rare but powerful item that any Mii would be elated to receive. It was hilarious how they'd respond to being given one. The location was randomized, and the photos of scenery they'd take with their best friends were cute. In Living the Dream, they're turned into garbage. Garbage that you buy when you run out of other things to purchase with your emotion balls. They give a Mii next to 0 EXP, and new locations are unlocked over time instead of being randomized. They turned what used to be a fun reward into something to waste your excessive money on, and they're no longer fun as a result. The trip to outer space, what used to merely be a funny bit if you handed a Mii some cash, has been made into the endgame reward that plays the credits. I just find it weird that they made what used to be an optional joke into the game's big ending moment. It feels lazy that it's now considered the biggest part of the game, and it spits in the face of the unique credits the previous games played when a baby Mii grew up, something that was used to present the theme of the game. The other features you unlock include quirks, which I'm perfectly fine with. It makes sense you'd want to unlock them over time, and this functions as a way to make each new set more exciting. I just wish there was more variety. The options to create different items in the palette shop, such as food, objects, and floors, are also rather inoffensive to me. though there only being 6 of them doesn't take very long to unlock. Finally, and most importantly, you can use emotion balls to unlock objects and terrain for the island. This game clearly wants to focus on customization, so much that every other feature was neglected because of it. So you'd hope the game would have a large array of great-looking options to personalize your island, such as a wide variety of terrain, pretty-looking and varied foliage, unique house exteriors that fit each Mii's personality, bridges for them to cross, and most importantly, height to give the island some varied terrain and architecture. I am honored to tell you this game's island customization is fucking ass. There are no unique house exteriors, no unique bridges, a minuscule amount of plants to choose from, and only 12 types of terrain for your Miis to walk on. All of that placed on one perfectly flat layer. This is more lackluster than New Horizons was on launch, and looks and runs worse as well. And that's coming from me, the guy who wants everyone involved in that game's development shot dead. This was my finished island. It is an example of the best you, yes you, can achieve with the game's tools, and it looks horrible compared to the 3DS game's island. So I can't say this feature was worth trading in all of the previous game's assets and bonus content for. The island is flat, repetitive, and boring, but I don't blame myself for that at all because of the grid-based system, and minuscule amount of objects and foliage I was given to work with. If I count the 4 alternating seasonal items as 4 objects, there's a maximum of 39 objects for you to unlock for your island. Including the objects you start with, there are only 45 objects to place around your island, except that number includes all of the plants and trees as separate objects. Flowers, trees, bushes, and weeds didn't count as public works projects in Animal Crossing. That would be stupid. So if I remove all of the plants from that total, it becomes 35. That's still counting all of the objects with repeated functionality though. If I ignore all of the different skins for lampposts, fences, stairs, and benches, it becomes a minuscule 22 objects to copy and paste around your island. If I were to get into the arguable quality of these items, there would be even less. But I've gone on long enough. For comparison, New Leaf, a 3DS game that prioritized its life simulation elements and dialogue variety, had over 80 outdoor decorations to purchase. And if I were to count all of the interior furniture, there would be over 1,000, most of which have unique designs, functionality, and sound effects. But I guess none of that is supposed to matter because you can design your own. Design your own using a cone or octahedron as a base. Oh, thank you, my liege. This is so much better than the previous game's fully modeled buildings and scenery. I'm an artist, by the way. Even if you were somehow able to design something great using these tools, which you cannot, it's not like they'd have the unique functionality with Mii's, the sprinkler, and water fountain do. So island customization in this game was a complete and utter waste of development time. This game removed so many of the best features of the previous game that made it feel like a full, rounded experience, with real care put into it. Items are completely removed as both a request and a reward from your Miis. You can't make them take photos with a disposable camera and hear their funny names for them. You can't give them bath supplies and hear them hum the concert hall music. You can't put them to sleep with the hypno pendulum and replay your favorite dreams. You can't give them a pan to cook you food or a sewing machine to give you some clothing. You can't hand them cold or stomach medicine when they're ill. You can't play with a slide puzzle, fan, swing set,
I'm not happy.
music box, mobile, or kaleidoscope. These games were always the fun part of the game for me as a child. I'd love seeing what my Miis would do with them, or in the case of the toys, how they'd look. In this game, they are just gone, with nothing in their place, even though they were a necessary reward for taking care of your Miis in the previous games. Tomodachi Quest isn't in the game, a short, simple RPG game that still had more depth than Pokemon. I mean, it would reward you with an item for completing. Other smaller events weren't implemented either, such as Frisbee, the photo shoot, barbecue, magic show, and everyone's favorite, the rap battle, most of which used the 3DS's embedded hardware in entertaining ways. It made me realize just how much Tomodachi Life used the console's unique hardware to its full potential, to both immerse you in the world and generally be more entertaining. The Switch is a piece of shit. Power-wise, I still don't believe it's anything to scoff at, but in terms of fun and memorable features, they don't exist. HD Rumble was completely forgotten about, but it was kind of cool. We all have phones now, so there isn't a need for a microphone or camera, as much as that saddens me. This means Miis can't take photos of you, you can't speak into the microphone, you can't share Miis online online for free or via Street Pass, and you can't use AR to see your Miis in the real world. Quirky features that gave the 3DS game a lot of its identity unable to be replicated. Both Quirky Questions and Islander Vote, iconic games that have been a constant staple since the first game, are just gone. I say consistent staple, but there have only been 2 games. There's no more compatibility tester with its massive, hilarious array of music and animations, as well as no more friendship forecast. No more rankings board for your Miis with its unique music. You get a priority ranking at the very end of the game during the credits, but that's it. Something that used to be a fun, free feature turned into the endgame reward. Baby Miis immediately grow up now, instead of having to take care of them and watch Miis look after them in their household. But the biggest omission is the concert hall, or even just singing for that matter, because that was a feature everyone unanimously loved in the previous games. The concert hall was a place I spent hours of my life in as a kid, writing songs that weren't just gibberish, but actually semi-coherent. Of course, implementing such a thing in Living the Dream would take passion and effort, something the development team is clearly opposed to. It would require someone to write catchy lyrics, choreograph dances for the Miis, depending on how many of them there are, as well as create unique assets and visual effects for each song. Stuff that's all beautiful to think about in retrospect, all of that work done for a small feature in a kid's game sold for $20 to $40. So yeah, it was replaced with nothing. Absolutely fucking nothing. Even the original DS game at least let Miis sing alone in their room. This game's music is incredibly obnoxious, so I doubt we were missing out on any catchy tracks anyway. Every song in this game was made to exemplify just how strange and wacky the game is, most of which can be easily summarized as a bunch of obnoxious bleeps and bloops. The main island theme, be it night or day, sounds like forgettable sludge and purely exists as background noise. The song that plays every time 2 Miis are becoming friends is annoying and has repeated so much that it has become a form of psychological torture. The news music in the 3DS game had a sense of urgency that added to the comedic value of what was being shown. In comparison, the music for the news in Living the Dream is unusually calm. The 3DS game had an incredible variety of songs for every niche scenario that this game just lacks. This game is not a Tomodachi Life game. That I actually would have enjoyed playing. This game is an incomplete, poorly programmed tool for artists to slap their imported images onto 2D planes and post to the internet for engagement. The lack of censorship shows how different of a mentality the developers had. They don't give a single fuck. Not that I'm complaining, as I like slurs, but it shows a complete lack of care compared to the 3DS game. The millennial writing of the trailer openly flaunted everything wrong with this game. Hey internet, laugh at the hilarious clown they all fall in love with. How zany. Look at the relatable female college student protagonist, who's just like you.
An outgoing, friendly college student.
All spoken by someone who sounds like your goddamn kindergarten teacher.
You can even choose the shape of ears.
Meanwhile, the trailer for the 3DS game was like this.
Let me show you with my own me. Let's go full screen for this, guys. Confident. And it classifies me as a designer. Sound like anyone you know? Just imagine all the crazy matchups that can happen in this game. I'm sure for many gamers it would be a dream come true to date Nintendo's fearless bounty hunter, Samus Aran.
This game is the Nintendo Switch's swan song, the last major first-party release the console will ever receive, and... Nah, actually, I can't think of a game more fitting.